In this program, we're going to roll 5 dice, which means it's really the same action on every die. You'll get an image of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6, and we're going to learn how to pass by reference in this program. We'll also add up the point values of all the dice. So there's really 2 things going on for each thing. We got an image from 1 to 6 and then a die value from 1 to 6. Let's explore what's up with passing by value and passing by reference. We've so far learned how to pass by value. That means a copy is received by a method. I declared a variable up there in BTN roll dice called number and set it equal to 10. Now we'll set up a method down here. We'll call it mess with number. And we'll set up a parameter parking spot with int x. So we're expecting an integer to show up. We're going to call it x inside this method. And inside here, we'll make x go up by 5. I could have written x plus equals 5. I have x equals x plus 5. So whatever comes in, we're going to increase it by 5. And we'll display it in a message box so we can check it out. We'll show that x is whatever x is. Let's head back up to our BTN roll dice click event. And we will also need to display a message box before we call or activate this method. So we'll show what number is before we call mess with number. Then we're going to actually call or activate the method and send number as an argument. And then we'll display a message box for afterwards, although unfortunately I did not change the word before to after. I copied and pasted and didn't change the before to after. We'll be okay recognizing when it happens. So we'll run the program, and number is 10 in the first time through, and then x becomes 15 as you would expect, and number is still 10. That's what we've seen before because we get a copy down here. Mess with number, when in that parameter parking spot, x gets a copy of number. Number is pointing to a place in memory, and it's assigned that memory block, and that's what number knows about. When x shows up in that method, it gets its own new place in memory, and it gets a copy of the number 10 from number. So they're referring to 2 different places in memory. So when x adds 5 to 10 and turns it into 15, number has no idea what's going on. It doesn't even care. They're in 2 different places in memory because x got a copy of what the value of number was. Well, let's change the game. We're going to put ref, short for reference, in front of int down there in the method parameter list. And in our argument list here, we'll put ref in front of number. Now let's look at what happens. We'll click roll dice, and number is 10 before we call the mess with number method. That turns x to 15. And now look, number is also 15. It's no longer 10. What happened? Well, we passed by reference. Number had a place in memory assigned to it, and in the value inside there was 10. When x came along, it got assigned that place by reference also. Number and x are referring to the same place in memory. That's what means passing by reference. They're referring to the exact same place in memory. So when x changed that value in memory to 15, well, it essentially changed it for number also because they're both referring to the same place in memory. We'll get rid of that now and make this more workable for our program. We're going to employ this passing by reference concept for us. Well, we're going to need point values for each one of the dice. There's 5 dice, so I'll go points die 1, points die 2, points die 3, points die 4, and points die 5. Those are all integers because they're all going to equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. We're also going to eventually need the total points for all the dice. That's going to be an integer. And we realize that we're going to do the same action 5 times. We're going to roll the dice one at a time, but we basically do the same thing all 5 times. So there's no point in writing pretty much the same code 5 times. We're going to write a method for it. And this time we're going to use the idea of passing by reference. So it will not return anything. It's just going to execute some code. So it's a void method. And I'll call it roll 1 die because we're going to roll 1 die at a time. We're going to pass by reference a picture box. We're allowed to do that. I'll call it pick die. I won't put any numbers on there. On the form, it's pick die 1, pick die 2, etc. And then by reference, I'll make an integer called die value. Here's the goal. I'll come back here. We're going to invoke or call this method, the first one with the first picture box, pick die 1, and with points die 1. But we need to put ref in front of both of those, because we're passing by reference. We've still got a red squiggly line under points die 1. You'll notice it's not been assigned a value yet. It's an unassigned local variable. When you pass by a reference, what you're passing has to already equal something. So I'm going to go up here and make all of these equal 0. Then they all have an initial value, and you notice that makes Visual C# a lot happier. So once again, whatever gets sent down, pick die 1 will go down into the pick die spot. That's this first picture box. And it's going to be sent by reference. Any changes made down in with pick die will affect pick die 1, and points die 1 is going to die value, and any changes made there will also affect that variable. You're going to need a random object. I don't think it's in your original shell program. It's up there in line 17. Make sure if you need to go back and pause the video and check it out, make sure you get that line of code up there so that we can now generate a random number. We need a random number between 1 and 6, including 1 and 6. So I'll make die value, that's going to be the value of the die that we have here, ran.next 1, 7. That'll get us a number from 1 to 6. But remember, it's also going to change the value of the argument that was sent down here to land in this parameter spot. It's going to be points die 1 the first time we run it. Die value and points die 1 are pointing to the same place in memory. We can then use this value of die value to assign an image to the picture box, which in this method is called pick die. It will be whatever argument was sent down here. I'm going to use a switch. There's 6 possible values here for die value. So we'll switch on die value. You can use an if you'd rather do that. And I'll have 6 different cases. Here they are. I made the last one default because the only choices were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And in each case, we'll make pick die. That's our picture box in this method. I know it doesn't exist on the form anywhere, but it exists in this method. Pick die.image equals properties.resources. We want dice1 green. And it's pretty much the same line of code for the other ones. It's just a different image. Dice 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So again, pick die 1 will be sent by reference to this method, and whatever pick die does, whatever image change it makes, will affect pick die 1. And it looks like it's working okay. Well, our big advantage of having these methods is we have a whole bunch of code here that we only need to write one time. We can activate this method or call this method 5 times. That's what we need to do because we have 5 dice. It wouldn't matter if you had 100 dice. You could call this method 100 times. It's the same action every time. Let's see if we can actually get some dice to roll, all 5 of them. Yep. Looking pretty good. Well, now our integer variables, points die 1, points die 2, etc., all have some values now, so we can add up those points and calculate our total points. So we'll get the sum of all 5 of those variables. Now that the methods have run, they all have values somewhere between 1 and 6, including 1 and 6 possibly. And we'll display it in the label that we have. And we'll test it out. Yep, those add up to 17, those add up to 22. Those do add up to 18. Ooh, a big roll there, 26. I'll put a breakpoint in here really quickly to show you again what's happening when we go passing by reference. So I'll add points die 1 to the watch, although it's not going to have any accessibility right now inside this method. And then I'll put die value in the watch. It's already 4. That was the random number that was generated. Then I'll take a step. It should take us to case 4. That's where we go. That will change the image. And then notice at the bottom, you'll see points die 1 is going to change to a 4 also, because they're pointing to the same place in memory. So at the conclusion of that method, points die 1 is now also 4. So now hopefully you know how to pass by value, which we learned earlier, and also how you can pass by reference.